So here we go. Here's a summary. So overall, right now anyway, we had a total of 515 observations. However, I know that there are people, myself included, that still yet to include some observations that I made for bumblebees throughout the season. So I think sorry about that. I think I saw that there was at least 10 more since I summarized this data. So sorry about that. We don't know how to turn off. So 217 opportunistic bumblebee reports, 172 opportunistic monarch sightings, and then 111 monarch site visits, and that comes down to 35 sites that were visited 2 to 5 times each. So that's fantastic. And some of these photos, you guys, are just amazing. You know I am not a good photographer, but oh my goodness, this makes me feel like I am really not a good photographer. So next slide. Okay, and this is sort of a rudimentary map of what we've done here. So the yellow and black are the bumblebee sites, and then the orange stars are the monarch data that came in. And then next one. And these are our 35 sites that were done, that were visited that were visited every 2 weeks or so. So some folks visited 2 or 3 times, and then there were some that visited up to 5 or 6. So again, any and all data is so welcome, and it's really, really fantastic that we have these data to look at these sites throughout the season. Next slide. So more summary data. Again, a lovely bumblebee photograph on a curly cup gumweed, which makes me like curly cup gumweed just a little bit more. We had about 77 participants, which is an increase of almost 30% over last year. And so far, again, we have about 912 donated hours so far. Again, unbelievable. That's a 45% increase from last year. So, so thankful. We could not do that just by ourselves, certainly. So thankful. Next one, and that's just a photo of one of the photos of monarch. I think that came from Fish Springs, perhaps, on the sunflower there. Next slide. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate in terms of, I mean, I would really, love to engage with you guys, face-to-face conversations as to how it went out there. But my goodness, some of the initiative you guys took in terms of, maybe some of the sites you were sort of shaking your head thinking, this doesn't feel quite right. Let me talk to the land manager here, or let me, wave this person down, and really took the initiative to let people know what we were doing, which is great. And in the meantime, finding some other sites or some other areas within that site that might be more fruitful, and or that might have some more nectar resources for either monarch or bumblebees. Any of those notes in the comment section were just so much fun for us to read, in terms of it really gave me some context around your visits, and really sort of put me there at your site, which was a lot of fun. But anyway, any additional information is always welcome, and I really thank you guys for putting those in there. Next one. So quickly, I'm just going to go through this. I saw Jim Spencer was on the call here, and so he went back to this Uinta Basin Pelican Lake site, which we were so excited to hear that it had just a whole bunch of this specific type of milkweed in it in early June, thinking, boy, we are really hopeful to see some monarchs there. May wasn't quite there yet, but June looked really good. Next slide. And then we go to August, and whoo, everything is pretty much done, DUN done, in terms of nectar resources. Not a whole lot out there. So next slide. So what's most interesting?
You undone, teacher.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So what was really interesting about this to me is that this photo came in from Vernal in mid-June. So, gosh, the monarchs are there, but they just were not using the Pelican Lake site at all. So it's really helpful to us to know that in terms of, you know, maybe we just need to, well, keep looking at that Pelican Lake site because it did have so much milkweed, but just also take a closer look at where the monarchs are actually using habitat versus where they're not. Again, it really helps. Next one. So here's another site that one of our volunteers went down to on a regular basis. This was in the middle of the state near Huntington. So as you can see, it almost looks like they're actually farming Asclepias speciosa or showy milkweed. But however, there was, according to the notes from the volunteer, really no nectar plants as of July even. And in August, he looked at a whole bunch of plants and really saw only one that had herbivore damage. Again, so this really, again, helps us understand maybe what some of the issue is in terms of where the monarchs are and where they are not. And it's sort of looking like milkweed may not be the #1 issue. It's looking more like we need to have the full picture, the full gamut of nectar resources there throughout the season to support those monarchs. But it also helps us in another way as well in terms of, well, gosh, maybe this could be a really good spot for habitat improvement because obviously the milkweed is there for the important parts, or an important part of the monarch life cycle. But maybe we approach this landowner, which happens to be the state at this point, in this instance, to really try to put in or improve the habitat by putting in some nectar resources to support those monarchs throughout the season. Next slide. And here's another instance. This was, again, one of those wonderful points that a volunteer made was, I mean, look at all this lovely milkweed, but they said only plants other than milkweed here are dry grasses and 2 Russian olive trees. Well, not fantastic for the remainder of the monarch life cycle. Next one. So this is just another one, again, came from up north where some of our volunteers saw monarchs laying eggs between late June and August 21st. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of habitat use there. And this is up in Logan area, close to a river. And we need to look closer at some of the remainder of the information about the nectar resources of this site. But I suspect being close to a river, some moisture, and I suspect that there's some other nectar resources there as well. Always fun to look through these photos and see this lovely looking healthy caterpillar. Next one. So again, as I say, it's really great to have a good idea as to where these healthy milkweed patches are, and even better to know the rest of the setting in terms of what's around those milkweeds, what other nectar resources are there. And again, this helps us really sort of concentrate on concentrating our resources on some good spots to improve habitat. And it does give a really good head start on these monarch habitat improvement and bumblebees, but I know even less about bumblebees than I do monarchs, so I will let Amanda take over with that. I think that might be it for me. Let's see what's next. Oh, no, it's not it for me. So this is also very exciting. So as I keep mentioning, nectar resources, nectar resources, nectar resources. So we are working with a couple growers in trying to find what might be easiest to grow and or start to hand out to people, or we're sort of in the pilot phase as to how exactly this is going to work in terms of handing over pollinator garden packets to people. And see, these are some of the photos, the species that we're working with. We have northern sweet vetch in production. Showy golden eyes, you can see, is looking pretty darn healthy. Nuttall's sunflower, which is a great nectar resource in October, in the right spot. So we're working with a couple, like I said, a couple growers in this, and trying to figure out how we can get the word out, but not, you know, at a pace that we can keep up with, I guess, because it is pretty tough to grow enough. If we got a huge amount of demand for these native nectar resources, we'd have to turn a lot of people away. So we're trying to do it smartly and strategically. So, oh, and these are some of the milkweeds that they are also, one of the growers is also working on, in terms of being able to harvest some of the seed off these plants and either hand out seed and or grow some more milkweed for specific sites. And I think maybe that might be it for me. Yes.
Gotta figure out how to unmute myself again. So hi, I'm Amanda Barth. I'm the Rare Insect Conservation Coordinator. So I'm going to talk about how your contribution to our program has bigger implications. So if you've been outside at all this year, you know that Utah's been experiencing a pretty severe drought. This year has been, I think, the 15th, or it's something along the top 20 driest years on record. And people have jokingly referred to our summer rainy season as the non-soon, because we've gotten less than an inch or something like that of rain this year. So it's been pretty impactful to wildflower and milkweed availability across the state. My own surveying across the state has been very depressing, because there's next to no wildlife resources, especially in the southern half of the state where I've been looking specifically. And that means that there are fewer resources to support monarchs and bumblebees across the state. And we've seen this just in recent years. There are already declining numbers, and to have fewer resources available this year than ever, or at least in the last decade, this is harmful, right? So the more farther and fewer they are between, the harder it is for us to detect them. And so having volunteers going out and looking really expands our ability to understand what we have and where our species are distributed. So as of October, early October, our bumblebee sightings were about 220. We got 11 different species so far, just early analysis and processing through the data. It looks like we have 11 different species photographed and submitted by volunteers. That's enormous, because we have like 14 species in Utah. And we have about 175 plus monarch sightings, which is also huge, because we have such a small Western population this year, that to have 175 sightings in one state within a range that only has about 30,000 individuals from the starting point in the wintertime, this is huge for us to be able to detect this. So volunteers submitted sightings at all life stages. We saw adults, caterpillars, eggs. I don't know about pupae yet, but I'm still looking through the photos. I'll take the next slide. So just to be clear about monarchs specifically, I just did orange dots. So because volunteers submitted roughly 175 observations, and overwintering grounds supported about 30,000 as of the Thanksgiving and New Year's counts. You can see that northern Utah is playing a very serious role in a critical role in breeding habitat in the summertime. So they are utilizing this habitat, and they are going to it and across the state. So the greatest abundance of monarchs at all life stages was observed across the Wasatch Front and in the Uinta Basin. Of course, this is where we have a lot more people looking, but it also means that they are there. And like I said, I conducted formal surveys, and volunteers were looking in southern Utah. We didn't find any evidence of monarchs in the southern half of the state using the habitat there. And this checks out against the complete lack of summer rains and the near absence of wildflowers across wide desert areas. So for some perspective, Washington State is also in the western monarch population range, and they reported only seeing fewer than 10 adult monarchs this year. We have over 175 sightings, and they have fewer than 10. So if that doesn't tell you how important our state is in providing habitat for the state, I don't know. There's a big comparison there. So drought and wildfires, of course, are happening across the western states. So this may be impacting other areas of the western monarchs range really severely. So it's important for us to be able to recognize how Utah can support monarch summer breeding, and this is essential in subsequent projects that we can implement in their conservation. And this is our second year of volunteer collected distribution data for Utah monarchs. And we submit this data to a regional database, and this helps the whole range obtain better clarity on population trends, on habitat preferences, and on effective conservation actions. Okay, next slide. So then our big insights for bumblebees. This was a pilot year for our bumblebee program dedicated to collecting specifically all bumblebee species observations. And we really struck gold this year. Volunteers have enabled us to get a clearer idea of where and when our native bumblebees are active across the state. And they've submitted more than 220 opportunistic sightings of at least 11 species. And again, it's estimated that there are 14 species or so whose range is in Utah. And that means this is a huge success for our first year with this program. It's also helpful to know where bumblebees are active, especially during a drought, because if their range is constricting during these years of limited resources, this helps us identify habitat that can support these multiple species of generalist foragers, including areas where wildflower diversity is higher and the soil is undisturbed. This helps us locate possible refugia or special areas where where populations might retreat to during these difficult conditions. And in particular, if we find especially rare species on public lands, this can support the development of partnerships and inform directed efforts to enhance and restore habitat that supports them. Since the western bumblebee has declined by 95% or more across its range, any information that we can gain on the habitat that it requires is absolutely priceless. If you happen to be like me and maybe Mindy, and you still have sightings of bumblebees or monarchs on your camera or phone that you haven't submitted, it would be really helpful if you uploaded them, because we are in the process of combing through our data and making sure that our analysis and making sure that I'm sorry, my notes are covered up by something. So having these observations submitted as soon as possible. Yeah, if you still need to submit them, cool. I'm working on it too. So now's the time, now that you're not out in the field all the time. I got busy and I couldn't, I'm still working on catching up. So this is the time to do it. It's not too late. I'll definitely be looking at these data for the next couple months for sure. And the more information that we can get by the end of the season, the better. Next slide. So I really want to celebrate something amazing. We have at least 3 data analysis, our early data analysis has suggested that we have at least 3 instances where volunteers have submitted sightings of an extremely rare species, the Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee, This is a type of bee that is, it's known as a social parasite, and it parasitizes the colony nests of other bumblebees by ousting their queen and laying their eggs in the nest for the host's workers to raise. And in this case, Bombus sucklei is particular to Bombus occidentalis, the western bumblebee. And so the existence of one implies the existence of the other. The really amazing thing about this is we did not know where this bee was occurring in Utah, and we haven't had records of it since the 1990s. So the fact that we have 4 different volunteers, I think I maybe even found them, so I got to submit my own data. The fact that we have evidence of this bee is fantastic. It gives us such perspective, and by proxy, it helps us understand where the western bumblebee is also being supported. Maybe it was last year, and so this year we're just seeing an increase in the number of, no, so far, I'm sorry, I'm seeing the chat pop up, but no, so far nothing has been definitively western bumblebee, but because we see the cuckoo bee that's associated with the western bumblebee, that's a really good sign for us. So it's a really gratifying result. And next slide. So again, just to echo what everybody's been saying already, every single sighting that you submit really helps us out, especially photographs. So conservation is going to require adaptive approaches. The more information that we have about a site, about the phenology of that site, about what appears to be the water availability for that site, the better. And we understand that we are relying on the time and the effort and the motivation of our volunteers, and so we want to have our resources for training be as accessible as possible. So we are in the process of making shorter, more deliverable tutorial videos and so on. These are some lessons that we're learning. You know, having resources be as bite-sized and distributable as possible is really important for us. And it's also really valuable for us to see which nectar species are available and which ones are supporting our pollinators. Like Mindy said, milkweed is not the limiting factor in Utah for monarchs. It's just not. There's lots of milkweed across the state. It's present, and when I looked all over the southern part of the state, and there was milkweed all over, and there were not monarchs because there were not nectar resources. So it's not the limiting factor. It is also extremely important, but it can't be the only thing. It's not the weak link. And again, photos are the most important thing for us, especially multiple photos of a bumblebee. I've been zooming in and frowning at so many pictures of bees for the last week, just to try and figure out the difference, because there's such mimicry and they're so similar to each other. And these are my own photos, so it's hard to tease out what it is that you see. And with monarchs, I mean, the honor system is fine for some things, but for this, it's really valuable for us to have a photo captures behavior. It captures the nectar resource that a butterfly might be on. It captures the instar stage that the caterpillar might be in, and that can, with that date, caterpillars develop at a pretty consistent rate. So if we have an idea of the age of the caterpillar, the plant that it's on, the date, the location, this is also important. So we can't really verify our data without a photograph, and as many photographs as you can include as possible. It's really crucial. And so being able to verify ecological information is one of the most important things for us. And that's what I have to say. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because this has gotten us much farther than I expected us to be by the end of the field season. I'm so excited to see how many bees we have and where they are, and to get a better sense of how motivated people are to go out and look for our pollinators. And you know, I hope you're telling your friends and your family, and that you've learned some good information, some valuable insights about ecology and pollinator conservation. And, you know, thank you so much. This means everything to me.
Thank you, Mindy and Amanda. I just wanted to reiterate just how powerful it is to hear from Utah's rare plant and rare insect coordinators for the whole state. You know, you guys are going to be faced with some tricky decisions and sharing data with Fish and Wildlife Service, who's going to have to make a decision about whether or not to list monarch, for example. And, you know, whether we're talking about the state of Utah and the Division of Wildlife Resources and Natural Resources, or we're talking about folks at Fish and Wildlife Service, the decision makers, the managers, the conservation planners, trying to decide where to put resources on the landscape, where to prioritize restoration efforts, and where to start thinking about doing more intensive surveys and having a better understanding of connectivity for this species. You know, those are really tricky decisions that they're faced with, and often they have to make those calls without real-time or up-to-date information that you all have helped gather. So I just want to reiterate just how meaningful this is, because we wouldn't have these data points, we wouldn't have this kind of broader understanding about where suitable habitats occur and how these species are using habitats on the landscape without your support. And I just wanted to point out, I know there's a lot of us who've been out to sites, and in particularly some of those folks going up to their stewardship sites multiple times a year, and you'll probably see the flowers changing, the different stages of blooming and different levels of moisture every time you go out. And for some of you, it looks like really great habitat. Let's say, for instance, if you're at one of the milkweed sites, and maybe you never actually saw a monarch or any stage of life stage of monarch, and yet you're kind of scratching your head, you're seeing all this milkweed. So I just want to point out that those data about the site, about the habitat characteristics, even if you didn't observe a monarch, are still very meaningful, because what we can do now is look at where in the landscape are we seeing what we consider a suitable habitat, but we're not seeing the species. And then where do we see the species occurring, and what are those differences, right? So maybe we've got lots of milkweed, but then we have swaths of just homogeneous lawns, and we don't have any nectaring resources, right? So that sort of information allows us to kind of stitch together what is that recipe for suitable habitat use at different times of the year. So you all are helping us, whether you actually saw the species or not, by taking those habitat data. And Mindy and Amanda, you know, shared some specific examples. So just for those folks who maybe didn't see the species or different species as much as they would like to, again, those habitat data are still very valuable. If we could go to the next slide. So this is just kind of a, you know, imagery from the last field season, and data that have been collected over multiple years. I think Amanda shared these maps at the thank you event last year. And you can just start to see, I think, Sarah, if you progress the slide, maybe there's some, oh, if you can go back, sorry. What I was looking for is you can start to see where monarchs might be moving across the landscape based on where you see those concentrated green dots. And similarly on the right, when you look at all the distribution for observations of Western bumblebee in the past, or potentially suitable habitat in the past. So again, once again, we're trying to get these species on the map that without these data, it'd be really challenging to make priorities on the landscape for where to restore habitat, where to gather more data, where to make some efforts to reach out to landowners and other folks managing the land on, you know, what do we do next? Do we think about seeding? Do we think about preserving certain areas at different times of the year? But without having these guys on the map, it's really hard to make informed planning decisions. So another thing that came up in our chat that I just wanted to make sure to remind folks, just kind of switching gears here a bit. If you do have data that you have not actually put into the application, which I'm guilty of this, you know, I've got a toddler with me on hikes, so sometimes I'm just taking quick videos and making sure I have the location, and I haven't filled out the full application on the phone. If you have that sort of information that you're going to still be putting into the app, don't worry about it. You can put it in pretty much any time between now and Thanksgiving. Obviously, the sooner the better, but I think Thanksgiving is about when we said that we're going to kind of put a bow on the 2020 data and start doing some more detailed analyses. And for those of you who are interested in participating again next year, when we have our training event and kind of launch the field season, we'll have more information for you as to what we found in the full 2020 field season's observations. So feel free to continue logging data. We've still got some warm days ahead of us, and you never know, you might still see some of the species we're looking for and have some habitats you want to head out to again. The other thing I wanted to remind folks, if we could go to the next slide, we've had some questions throughout the field season about species identification, both milkweed and insect species. And so if you are interested as to how well you did with your IDs, maybe you've got several different bumblebee species that you think you saw, but you're not sure if you got them right. You know, if you want to reach out and email Amanda, you can do so. And then more specifically, if you're looking at some of the rare plants or just the different species of milkweed, if you want to ask more questions about how to ID those, or specifically if you want to send Mindy a photo, I know she would love to see those as well. And then if you have broader kind of community ecology questions or questions about the project, feel free to reach out to myself. And also Sarah is our amazing communications and volunteer coordinator. So you can feel free to reach out to Sarah for more intel about the project. Another thing I wanted to mention is just our amazing volunteers. So you have an image there of our Community Science Volunteer of the Year on the Pollinator Project, Courtney Johnson. She was out logging data quite a bit, and she also made sure to share her activities. I think she mostly was sharing that via Instagram, and because of that, we have more participants. So she was helping us with engagement as well as collecting data. So we really appreciate you, Courtney. But there's so many others out there who, you know, visited their stewardship site regularly, and folks who added new stewardship sites based on finding milkweed in places that we didn't know existed, and finding monarchs in, you know, urban areas. And so we just really appreciate all of you dedicated volunteers. Again, we couldn't have this, you know, landscape scale, full field season worth of data without your support. And I just wanted to give you a little exciting kind of preview into next year. So we don't know what the next field season is going to bring. We're not sure if we're all going to be continuing social distancing and mask wearing and, you know, all of these virtual meetings. We just can't really predict that. But regardless of our pandemic situation next field season, we will have some opportunities to sign up for field trips. So we're going to at least do a couple of field trips where, and of course we'll, if we need to, be practicing safe COVID-19 measures. But we will try to get out to some sites where you can actually interact with our state rare plant and insect conservation coordinators, as well as Wild Utah Project biologists and staff. And so if you're interested in that and getting out and asking some questions from some of the experts, we should have that opportunity. We're going to be developing a partnership with NRCS, and I think we have Jim on the call, who has also logged a lot of data this summer, and we really appreciate that. And what we're going to be trying to do is talking with landowners who are interested in pollinators and pollinator conservation to see if they would be interested in collecting data on a regular basis at their on their property, and maybe even doing some planning with seedlings or seeds. So that is an exciting development for next field season. So you'll find out about that if you're on our list, and feel free to share that opportunity with others as well. The other thing I wanted to make sure to mention, I think we have a link at the bottom on this slide. So if you are interested in receiving either seeds or seedlings, and I think we'll probably get you a little bit of information as well to kind of increase the suitability of your own yard for pollinators. We have a link there for you to share your information. I think it's in the chat box. Looks like Sarah just added it. So we mentioned our volunteer gift. I wish we were all in person and providing you with great food and beverage and social interaction, but given the state of things, the best we could think of this year as a thank you would be if you can fill out the form above. In the link in the chat box right there, you can fill out a form that gives us information as to what county you're located in, and if you would like seeds and or seedlings, and a little info about how to increase pollinator habitat in your own yard. We'll have that opportunity, and we'll get back to you once we have those resources available. We're going to be trying to time that according to the growing season and when it's most appropriate to put seeds out or seedlings out, depending on the species, depending on where you live. And I think with that, I haven't been tracking all of the comments. So I think, Sarah, are we ready to open it up if anybody wants to chat? And I think Mindy, yeah. So if anybody has anything to add, now would be a great time to do that. And then we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, so yeah, if either of you have anything to add, let me know. In the meantime, we did have one question that Amanda, you started answering about wildfire smoke. Oh, it looked like you answered it completely, but is there anything else that any of you want to add about how wildfire smoke might be affecting bumblebee and monarch sightings or behavior?
Well, I just wanted to sort of echo that Alex asked a question about whether fires are impacting sightings for monarchs and bumblebees. And I think really the biggest impact that it has had is that people don't want to go outside in the smoke. I didn't. So I think that would absolutely affect our data collectors, and sending people across the state for, weeks, for several weeks, where air quality was just awful. So I do think that has an impact. So far, I have not heard any specifics, and this question has come up in some of the working groups that I'm involved in, whether or not smoke has an impact on monarch migration or monarch activity or bumblebee activity. And it doesn't appear, the air quality doesn't appear to have serious detrimental effects, but we don't know how that's going to relate to monarch once the monarchs get back to California, that has been subjected to extensive fires, and a handful of overwintering groves have been burned as well. So there's, as far as Utah is concerned, yeah, we have we've had probably limited sightings during the smoky season, but the population itself could definitely be more impacted in its overwintering range.
Yeah, thank you. And then we also, okay, so Tanya, it looks like if you clicked on the form link that it had a permissions error, so I just went in and hopefully that should be fixed. So let me know if you still have issues with that, Tanya. And then Tanya also said we'd love to host you all in the Uinta Basin. So that's That's a fun one. Yes.
We're on our way, Tanya.
Yeah.
And we do have some nice accommodations up at Flaming Gorge where we could probably host a few people in one of our state facilities that are essentially just a nice little bunkhouse. Anyway, so sorry, my toddler's crazy right now. So if any of you want to come to the innovation and do some studies, we'd love to have you.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to give a shout out to Tanya and Jim on the call. I mean, everybody's busy right now, but we know you guys have your own work plans, and we just really appreciate the representation from our state and federal folks, and just hope to coordinate with you guys more. And I think it just makes it so much more meaningful for folks like me and volunteers to be able to hear about how these data will actually help you all as wildlife and habitat managers make more informed decisions. So we really appreciate you guys making the time to be here, and again to Mindy and Amanda for all of your coordination.
A special shout out to Jim and his photography of bumblebees. Those are A+ photos, Jim. Really nice, very satisfying to look through. Oh, and Natasha's also done a lot of work. Natasha Haddon. So it's been really nice to see all of the work that's been coming in from the Uinta Basin and from a National Park Service, and it's really nice. It's really encouraging. There's a lot of data in there. You guys have done a great job.
We have one more question as well from Jim, who says, I often wondered, looks like you answered this to Amanda, but if there's anything further to say on distinguishing B. huntii from B. centralis. Yeah,
it's not easy. They're notoriously difficult. There's mimicry, if they all look similar to each other, then predators that are like, I don't know, something stung me, it's the orange stripy one, right? Like that's all a predator needs to know, and that's all it takes for mimicry to be successful. Right? So a lot of Intermountain West bumblebee species have orange stripes on their abdomens, and that helps them out, and that makes it really hard to identify them from photos.
The good news is, we really, don't worry, I guess that's one of the options right on the app if you're not sure what species you have, and
we're looking through those photos.
We QA.
Slowly.
Yeah. And by we, I mean Amanda.
Yeah, by me. And an intern.
So really, don't worry about that. For those of you who are not quite sure if you got the species correct or if you were hitting unknown, those data are still really useful, and they get QA'd by our expert.
Yeah. And then we just had one comment. Someone said, I thought the best way to find bumblebees was not to look, but listen, which is
fun.
I like that. I don't see any other questions in here though. So if you all have anything else you'd like to add, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if anyone attending has suggestions for how the experience might be better for you, for what you'd like to see, we love to hear all your feedback. Or if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us, any of us. But yeah, other than that, is there anything else that you all can think of that you'd like to go over?
I was just going to say, if there aren't any more questions or feedback on how to improve the program for now, if anybody just wants to share an experience, we'd love to hear from you. And if you want to just unmute yourself, that's fine. Or if you want to add it in the comments, I'll just share like more broadly. I've heard from folks, and I know this to be true for myself, that this year in particular, getting outside has been just very important for myself and my family as we're working from home and have our little one at home as well, not at school. And so getting outside has just been so crucial, but getting outside and having a purpose, collecting data at the same time, just has been great for a lot of families to have those activities together. So we've gotten some great feedback. But if you have anything specific you want to share experience-wise, we'd love to hear that too.
Mary, I did have one maybe comment or suggestion regarding the app. If there were more space in the comments field, I could have written complete species lists of the pollinator, of the nectaring plants that we were seeing, rather than just taking a picture and getting a general family to it. But I don't know, that I tried on the very first one I did, I tried listing everything I was seeing flowering, and I ran out of space and I realized that wasn't the way to do it. So some way to make more specific lists might help. I don't know.
That's really, really good feedback, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah, duly noted, Jim.
That's great. Yeah, if there's anything you guys remember when you were making observations that was challenging, yeah, I worked through with a couple of people, just making sure the application downloaded and they were able to get running. But most people, I think have found it fairly intuitive. But I think we are open to making tweaks to those data fields, I think, if people have suggestions.
Yeah, otherwise, I don't see anything else. Yeah, if anyone else wants to share anything, you're welcome to. We are up to the time we said we would be, so if there's no one else hopping on, yeah, please just feel free to reach out to us. We absolutely love hearing from you. And again, we are so grateful for all the work that you all have put in. And it's so fun to see all of you here, because a lot of this stuff has all been virtual and no FaceTime. So thank you all for attending and for all the work over the season. We just really, really appreciate you. And yeah, with that, we hope you have a wonderful evening. And thanks again for joining us. Hope to hear from you in the next few weeks, and don't forget to again fill out that Google form if you would like to receive pollinator resources. But have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Pollinator Pursuit Volunteer Appreciation. We are so grateful to have you all here. It's so fun to see your faces. Thank you for being with us this evening. I'm Sarah Woodbury. I'm the Communications Coordinator for Wild Utah Project. And first, as we begin this event, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that although we are gathered virtually tonight, much of this work is currently based in or near Salt Lake City, which is on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute people. And I'd just like to pay my respect to Indigenous elders of this area, both past and present. Again, we are so grateful for you all joining us and for all the work you've done this year. We know this is a lot of work, and this project really is only possible because of your dedication. So you'll hear about some of the amazing impacts of this work over the season, but I just hope that you keep in mind that it is you who is making this possible for these struggling pollinators. Just a few housekeeping notes before we start. Please first remain muted. We'd love to see your faces, so feel free to keep your cameras on. But if we could all just remember to keep ourselves muted to minimize distractions, that'd be wonderful. Additionally, if you have any questions throughout the event, feel free to type them into the chat box or wait until the end to ask in person. And we may be sharing links in the chat box, so feel free to keep an eye out for that. And we'll get started here. So we'll first hear from Mindy Wheeler, just a summary of the 2020 season. And Mindy is the Rare Plant Conservation Coordinator for the state. After her, we will hear from Amanda Barth, who is the Rare Insect Conservation Coordinator for the state. And she'll talk about the big picture implications of all of your work and some amazing successes from the season. And then lastly, we will hear from Mary Pendergast, who is an ecologist and conservation biologist for Wild Utah Project. And she will talk a little bit more about the impact of this work and about the volunteer gift. And following that, we will have our Q&A session where you all are free to ask any questions you have. So thanks again for joining us. And Mindy, the mic is yours.